But what we've done with Azure Analysis Services is we've removed the need for you to run this locally. You can now use Analysis Services as a fully managed platform as a service inside Azure. And you can sit Analysis Services in between your data sources and Power BI or Tableau or other clients as well. And what Analysis Services does here is it serves as kind of a lens for your data. Your business users don't see the data as it's stored in the data warehouse in raw tables, but they see it through a business lens where it's friendly to them. It has the business logic baked in. And they can go ahead and access the data without having to know really technical details of how that data is stored. So the first thing that Analysis Services really helps you with is taking that data that's stored in raw staging tables and data warehouse tables and turning that into a business-friendly semantic model. Yeah, everyone's kind of been in a meeting where two people come in reporting the same revenue number. They're reporting the same metric, but the number happens to be different because maybe they use different logic to go ahead and calculate those numbers. With the semantic model, you can bake in that business logic, so when someone pulls in revenue, or two people pull in revenue, they get the same number every time. This way, users can connect with Power BI, they can connect with Tableau, they can connect with Excel, and they can just start going. They can start building their model. They don't have to worry about relationships and how the data fits together. They just pull in what they need, and the reports get built out for them. It's almost like you're building a Power BI report, but you're skipping the first four or five steps. The other thing Analysis Services really helps you with is these lightning fast queries. You use Power BI with small models. All that data that gets loaded into the model is now stored in memory in a cache. And data can be accessed very fast. In Analysis Services, those caches can be a whole lot bigger. And the data is still just as fast, which I'll show you in a moment. And this data cache not only gives you great performance, but also can reduce the load on your backend data sources. So you're not always going back to your SQL database, your SQL data warehouse, and hitting it with very heavy business queries. So let's actually take a look at that. So I have Power BI desktop here, and it's already, it's already connected to an Analysis Services model running in Azure. And this model happens to contain data for all the New York City taxi cab rides, which you can imagine is a lot of rides. How many rides? Well, I can actually come on here and I can find a column called trip count. I'm just going to drag it and drop it onto the canvas here. Now, what that did was it went and counted every single row that's on the trip table. And if I switch that, you can see that's just about 10 billion rows, actually just over 10 billion rows.
That's with a B, right?
That's a B. Yeah. So just to kind of elaborate on what we did there, all we did was drag a column in, and immediately we got results of 10 billion rows right there on the screen. Just a click and a drag. Now, because it's so fast, we can start to ask lots and lots of questions of the data. And you can ask right questions, wrong questions. It doesn't hurt you because it's so fast, you can keep asking more and more questions. So let's see, where are these trips coming from in New York? So I'm going to throw our pickup latitude and our longitude on here, and then I'm going to throw revenue on here. And every time I'm clicking, it's actually firing off queries to Azure Analysis Services. And running them. My connection might have gone out.
While we're waiting for the connection to come back, Philip from Ohio is asking, that data, is it sitting in cache in Azure?
This is sitting in cache in Azure, so it's 100% in memory. There's no paging here. I mean, other products claim to be in memory, but typically they'll page in and out of memory, so there's some loading time. This, when the model's up and running, is 100% in memory.
Perfect, thank you.
So we can see we scanned, again, those 10 billion rows, and we plotted every single point on the map. So it's New York, there's a lot of trips. So right now we have a map with a lot of points on it. Let's see where the most popular places are to pick people up from. Because, you know, maybe we're a cab driver and we want to figure out what's the where we're going to make the most money from if I pick people up. So let's actually take, let's look at the revenue per trip. Again, every time I'm clicking, it's firing off a query. So again, that's scanned in less than a second. And I'll throw the top zip codes on here. And it'll run that query. So you can see two zip codes really kind of jump out. Any idea what two zip codes in New York might be?
Having just flown, keyword flown. I think I could guess. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we can see for sure. So when we click on one, what it'll do is it actually cross highlights and filters down the map and actually filters down this row count here. So what it did actually is ran 2 queries instead of just one. And you'll see, yep, the first one is JFK Airport. And the second one, we'll run queries again, run 2 more queries, is going to be LaGuardia Airport. And it's so busy there, you actually have to line up on the highway apparently to get a cab. So every time I'm clicking, it's firing off queries, multiple queries. So BI reporting can tend to be kind of demanding. So you want to have lots of visuals on a report. You want to have them very interactive. That comes at the cost of a lot of queries. Something like a SQL Server or a data warehouse will get flooded by those queries, especially if you have a lot of users. Having that cache here and having those queries be able to answer in sub-second can really give a good experience to the users and also give a complete experience to your users. They're not going to sit here and wait for things to spin. All right, so we see that we can make more revenue per trip by going to JFK on average than LaGuardia. But let's see, is that really the right place to go? Is that where we're going to make the most money? Let's look at the number of trips. I'll throw trip count back on here. And let's slice that by the trip duration. And make myself some room. There's a neat little trick in Power BI. By default, when you click on things, we call cross highlights, where it shows you what percentage of the thing you clicked on is of the total. A little hard to see there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that behavior. And instead of it cross highlighting or slicing, I'm going to make it filter. So now when I click on JFK, I'm going to see only JFK here. And you see the average trips from JFK are between 30 and 45 minutes. If you've ever been to JFK, it's kind of out there. It's not near the city center. But when I click on LaGuardia, you can see the average trips are between 15 and 30 minutes. So while yes, I can make a little bit more money by going to JFK per trip, I can probably get a lot more trips if I pick people up from LaGuardia. And these are the kind of things you can do in fractions of a second with really, really large data. Just because it's in cache, in memory, and it's really a grown-up Power BI here. So that's a semantic model with taxi data, all cached. Let's go back to the deck for just a moment. And actually, let's show how to build one of these models. Not sure how many people remember this. It's a few years old now. Owl.net. This is actually a build demo we did, and then it kind of went viral like 3-4 years ago. It was actually a Power BI demo in the end, where you'd upload your photos. It would detect if you're in the faces in the photo and if those were male or female, and try to predict the age of that person. In the demo, we actually were demoing the website, the new APIs that had come out, and then we were also demoing how that data could stream into Azure Stream Analytics and then into Power BI in a real-time dashboard. So I've always shown the real-time dashboard piece of this, but we also streamed that data and kept it in a data warehouse for historical reporting. And that's part I don't think I've ever actually shown before. So we kept things like number of photos uploaded, how many faces were detected in the photo, the time it took to upload the photo, what type of OS it came from. So all that we stored in a data warehouse. And now let's go ahead and build a new model on top of it. So I already created an Azure Analysis Services server, which you can do with just a couple clicks in the Azure portal. You click on New, you click on Analysis Services, and it'll spin it up for you. In here now, we also have a link to our new web designer. So I'll open that up. It'll load our web designer. And this will actually let you go ahead and start building models directly in the cloud, in the web, without having to download any tools. So I can come in here and say, add a new model. And my data my data for this is actually stored in a SQL data warehouse. So I'm going to call this new how old. And I can pick from SQL Server, SQL data warehouse, or I can actually even upload a Power BI desktop file. So if you have a Power BI desktop file you've already created, you can upload it and it'll convert that into an Azure Analysis Services server. And it'll keep your data and you can start working on it from there. But I'm going to go build a brand new model from SQL data warehouse. And when I click on this, it'll show me all the data warehouses that are in my subscription, including that New York City taxi one. And I will pick the how old telemetry. And I'll put in my connection information. Next. And this will give me a list of all the tables that are in the data warehouse. And normally a data warehouse will have dozens or hundreds of tables. I simplified this a bit just so I can show you the whole process end to end, and I only have a handful of tables in here. But you can see I still have the real tables and I have the staging tables. So this is something a user, if they were going to build a report from scratch talking directly to this database, this is something they'd have to figure out themselves. But since we're going to build a semantic model, we'll hide all that complexity from them. So I'll take only the tables that actually have real data in them. And I'll say create. And this will actually go ahead and create a real model for me. I'll take a couple seconds to look at the metadata that's in the database. And the model gets created. Now this model will instantly work. So I can go in here and I can grab, let's look at let's look at actually session ID. And let's just do a count. This is basically give us the row count. And as I'm executing queries here, since we didn't actually cache anything, so what it's doing is actually firing off SQL queries. It's translating what I'm doing here into SQL queries through the model and firing those off to the database and running them there. So you can see there's actually almost 600 million rows in here. So let's make this model a little bit more friendly. We can go into our modeling view and throw all our tables on here. And let's organize this a little bit. So we have our fact table. I'll put that in the center. We have the OS dimension. We have the submission method. And we have the browser dimension. If you use SQL Data Warehouse, they actually don't have relationships in the metadata. SQL has it, but Data Warehouse doesn't. So we actually have to go ahead and draw them. So I'll draw, from the foreign key to the primary key for OS. I'll make this an inner join and save it. And by putting relationships in the model, this is how you can get an end user who can drag and drop columns from different tables, and it'll just automatically work without them having to know the relationship because they're already built in. We'll do submission method. And then we'll do browser after that. And I forgot to say inner join. Oops. And go back to the query view. Now that we have the relationships in there, let's do one more query in here. We actually test these things out as we try them. So let's look at the face count by the different operating systems. And say run again. This is going to translate into a SQL query and come back with the data. But let's clean this up a little bit more. So we still have a bunch of ID columns in here. We have our foreign keys and primary keys still showing up. This is not very business friendly, user friendly yet. So I'll go back to the modeling view. We'll clear out our selection. And let's hide all these foreign keys. So I don't need to show the primary keys of the tables anymore because we created the relationships. I don't need to show the foreign keys anymore. We'll get rid of all of them. And we can just, in one click here, we can go ahead and hide them. And now in the query view, it's starting to look a lot cleaner in here. We don't see those extra columns in here. I'm also a little bit of a stickler. I hate having the names that show up in the database, things without spaces in them. So I like to rename a whole bunch of things. So I'm going to click a bunch of columns that I want to rename in here. And then I can actually do this kind of a bulk rename, which just came out. Spaces in there. I go ahead and save and close. And it's actually update all those columns at one time. And now we're starting to look a little bit more friendly. Let's do a little bit more here. Let's actually create some measures. So let's encapsulate some business logic in here. I'll click on measures. We'll add a new one. And we'll just say total faces. I'm going to do some simple ones. And the editor is still loading. Okay. Some face count. A couple more in here. Let's say, oops, average faces. Average number of faces. That will be average. These are simple measures, but obviously you can do much more complex. I'm going to keep adding. Let's do total processing time. Time. This will be the time it takes to process the images. We'll have to look at the average processing time. And let's also look at two more. Let's look at the image size. So total image size, sum of the image size, and we'll do average image size. And I lost my image size. Here we are. And I create 6 measures here, and I can again save those all at once, and they'll get created. And we switch back to our query view again. Now we can see this model kind of taking shape before us. We see all our measures created here. I can drag those in and use them. Let's do a little bit more cleanup. Let me actually go ahead and let's put all our measures, since we don't need these columns anymore because we made measures out of them, so I'll hide them. And let's put some stuff in folders. So let's put these in a folder called metrics. And let's put all this in a folder called session information or session. And one more, let's put this in a folder called location. And we'll flip back to query one more time. And you see the folders get created. And now we have a nice looking model, very clean. And I can actually go, not only can I query it here, I actually go ahead and open this in the Power BI desktop. And what this will do is it'll create a new Power BI desktop file for me with a live connection to this model in this server. We'll open that. It will ask me to log in. And we can see the changes we made. We have our folders in here with our measures. So let's put average time on here, average image size, total faces. Let's break it down by the OS name. And it'll run, we get our results. Throw this into a table for a minute. Now the desktop actually does a good job now of trying to apply default formats. So it's put some commas in here for my average size, and I have a whole number here for my total faces. I can actually go ahead and format these a little bit nicer so when the user pulls things on here, they see the right formats right away. So let's go back to the designer real quick. Go back into our model mode. Let's say all of our average, well actually, let's go with our total, or all of our whole numbers. Let's give them a format string, that's a whole number. So I want to have a comma in there. I want to have 3 numbers after that and no decimal points. Apply. And then for average number of faces, or for all the averages, let's also give them a comma in there, but also let's give them 3 decimal points. Of a decimal point there, and then 3 pounds, and say apply. And I can come back here, we'll refresh this view, and you'll see the formats are automatically applied now when someone pulls these in. So these are ways you can make the model ready for users who can just come into Power BI Desktop and just start dragging and going. Reuse the logic across multiple users. Not only does this work in Power BI, but I can also open this up in Excel. So not only...
No, you have to stop sharing.
That's all right. Not only is that stuff reusable across Power BI, but when we open up Excel, we see the folders, we see all the names and stuff we put in here. I can go and I can drop The average image size in here. We see the format strings take place. I put the OS name in here. And it just works just like it did in Power BI. So again, that logic is all reusable across. So we built our model. If I want to do some more advanced stuff here, that's maybe not in the Web Designer, I can also open this up in Visual Studio, and this will generate a Visual Studio project for me using the SQL Server data tools. And there's lots more things you can actually go ahead and do in there. So that's building the model. Let me show one more thing, and then we'll open up for questions. Just a couple things to think about when using AS. This is it's good with small models too, but it's also very good with very large models with high concurrent usage. The queries are still very fast because everything's all in memory. You can refresh this data on demand. We have data partitioning. This is what I'll show you in a second. This is how you can load such big data without having to reload that data all the time. Right now, we support up to 500 GB of data after it's been compressed. And programmability here, we have all kinds of APIs. We have a .NET API, we have ARM, we have PowerShell, we have all kinds of things you can automate the things that you do here in analysis services. Everything is automatable. So just talk about loading data real quick. The way the object model works for analysis services is you have a model, and models have data sources, they have tables, they have relationships, they have other things as well. Inside a table, tables have columns, they have measures, they have hierarchies, but they also have partitions, and partitions have a query. So if you use Power BI, you have tables that have exactly one partition in them, and that'll have usually an M query in there that'll pull all the data from your underlying database or your underlying data source, depending on what you told it to take. And every time you go and refresh your Power BI desktop file, it basically reruns the query in that partition and reloads all that data. So every time you load, you have to reload all the data. Now, when you get to something like 10 billion rows, or even way before that, it's not really practical to reload all the data. So what we have in analysis services is the ability to create more partitions. So instead of having a partition here that says select all from the fact table, I can change that to just select all from the fact table where the date is 1/1/2017. And I can process that. Now I'll have data for 1/1/2017. I can then go ahead and add another partition for the 2nd of January and put a different filter on that and process that one without affecting the first one. So I'm incrementally now adding more data. And I can keep doing this, and I can keep doing this. Not only can I add data by adding partitions, I can remove data by removing partitions. And I can choose to reprocess individual partitions if I just want to change the data for a specific day here. So this is how you can get around having to reload the entire model every time. So when incremental data comes in, it might take you just minutes to load instead of hours and hours to bring everything back in. This is how we got to that 10 billion number. That was kind of a brief intro into partitioning. There's a nice white paper out there that talks about how you can do automated partition management. You go to aka.ms/AS processing. It goes into more detail there. Another place to actually get more information, we have the analysis services product site. We'll take you to our documentation. We also have the analysis services BI blog where we actually announce all these new features, including a bunch of new stuff that came on the Web Designer today. And all that is available there. Chuck, were there any questions?
There are lots of questions.
All right.
First of all, I don't know if I want to be snarky and kind of cute. I guess let's start with there. So Karma does come around, and Danny is asking, can I now in Power BI Embedded? And I'm grinning huge because Josh owned the original Power BI Embedded. Can it now do visual or embedded visuals that support direct query and live connections?
As far as I know, they can connect to Azure Analysis Services, but it has to be as a AD user, Active Directory user.
That's right. That's right.
So that is supported.
So yes, and the answer is yes, you can do that. You can get all the visuals that you can do inside of PowerBI.com, not custom visuals. They still don't support that.
Okay.
Yeah, they still haven't got there. Okay, so I just thought it was cute that I had to start with that question to Josh. So Jenna was asking the taxi model. How big is that? Roughly? That
was 10 billion rows. It's about 250 gigs, I believe.
250 gigs. Okay. And then the limit right now, I think Brett already put in the chat window, is 400 gigabytes.
And that's after compression.
Okay.
We get some really good compression.
And then Brian Mather was asking, or I guess commenting, I don't know the right term here, was you showed us how to go from a model easily into a Power BI report. I believe you guys now support the opposite, where I can actually get a model. Can you show us that as well?
Yeah, so if you have a Power BI, let's see if I can open it real quick.
And I want to thank Brett. He's actually been walking through most of these, but I realize a lot of people won't be looking at the comments. They'll just watch the video. They'll watch it online or
Okay.
far away.
Oops.
Okay.
Desktop version. Okay, so I won't show you the file, but I have a desktop file. Actually, did it open still? So I have a desktop file that has data in it, has measures in it.
So what's happening to Josh is, and we're addressing this. I don't know if we publicly announced that we've got that fixed where we'll be pulling down upgrades for the desktop.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he's got an older desktop with a newer PBIX.
They update so fast.
Yeah, the team actually is pretty fast. And next month, that's coming in.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. So I have that file. I want to turn it into an analysis services model and come back here. And I can go and say add, instead of from data warehouse, I can say from Power BI desktop, let's name it. So. Pick that file, say import. And what it'll do is it'll grab that file, grab the analysis services backup file that's in there. It'll upgrade it to be an AS model, give it partitions and load it to the server. And I can treat it like a regular AS server AS model at that point. I can edit it, I can add more partitions to it.
And of course, all of the limits of Power BI desktop have just got thrown out the window.
Yeah, now you're in AS world where you're by the rules there, basically.
Okay. So let me grab some other questions. So is opening the model in a Power BI desktop not imposing the 1 GB set? No, there's no limit for AS.
There is a we're working on fixing this right now, but there is a timeout now on upload, which is about 3 minutes. If your file is really big and it takes more than 3 minutes to upload, it is failing at the moment. We're working on changing that. So I'd recommend there, if you do have that case, is just remove most of the data, load it to AS, and then you can process all the data back in and even more.
But it's something you guys are working on.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Is there any chance we can import from an RDLX? So why does John always ask these hard questions?
RDLX. What are you trying to import from the RDLX?
So yeah, John. So what are you actually trying to bring across? What is it that you'd like to get? Does Azure Analysis Services work with Azure B2B users?
Yes, it does. So you can use B2B. You can bring in live ID accounts, or users from different tenants. You have to invite them like you would for B2B. Then they just work like normal users.
So another constraint that Power BI.com has that you guys don't.
Yeah, so it still will work in Power BI.com. The live IDs won't, but the regular accounts will work, but they have to be logged in as themselves to access it. So if you have a user from, let's say, Contoso, they have to be logged into their Contoso Power BI account for it to work.
And Robert, one of our internal guys, was asking, so today Tabular is the only offering in the service, is that right? Okay. And I guess what they're going to do, Robert, is these guys work on lean principles and MVP. Going to try to figure out where the need is as far as in your backlog. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely in our backlog. We plan to do it. We want to make a solid Tabular service. There's some challenges that we have to solve for Tabular that also apply to multidimensional, so we're going to solve them once and make sure they can be used in both services. But it is definitely a plan. I mean, we love multidimensional. Most of us came from that realm, so we're definitely looking forward to supporting it.
Yana from Canada was saying, I think I may have missed some context up higher. That means that the reports are visible to all Azure Analytics services authenticated. And I think the answer is no. You can go out and...
No, so the model itself has its own authentication. So you have to add users to roles and apply security there for anyone to be able to see the data. You can open it to everyone if you so choose, but by default, it's locked down.
Yeah. Okay. So Yana, if I missed some context up there, feel free to go out and put it down. Otherwise, Brett, did I miss anything? And if I did, go ahead and put it back down. What we're going to do is we'll get Tony's question, and we're going to call that one the end, because I promised Josh a beer for every 10 minutes he's early, and I told him he owed me a beer for every minute that he's late. So right now, I'm going to give him 3. But Tony's question is, can Azure Analytics connect to SharePoint Online or Access files stored there?
Can SharePoint Online? Yes, with a gateway.
Okay. Do you guys support all the gateway connectors? Or
We don't support all the connectors yet. We support a lot of them. We're in the process of making them all work. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of hidden from you in Power BI, which is a lot of that is the partitioning piece I talked about and the queries that go in there. When we give it to you in AS, we open those things up to you, so we let you do the incremental processing. But because of that, you need to be able to see the actual M queries that get written to those partitions. So we can actually convert those into something that you can actually do something with, and that's what we're in the process of doing. So we've done it for the popular sources, for the big ones there, but we have to do it for the rest, and that's kind of just what the holdup's been. So we're actively working on adding the rest in there.
So Tony asked a great question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. I think the answer is yes. Can you redirect an existing Power BI report in PowerBI.com to analysis services? I know there's an API to update the string.
Yeah, you can definitely do it through the API.
Okay.
You can get adventurous and do it through changing around the files on the desktop, but it's not supported. Through the API, you can definitely do it.
Okay. How many data source types do you have in Azure AS? You know, that's not even a really fair question because
changes every day.
I was going to say the team literally is Faisal and Brett's team work together, and hopefully they're going to have parity. So soon it will be 178, I think is what I last counted, plus one new one a week is actually their run rate.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of overhead for us to pick them up from there, but we're trying to pick them up as fast as they come.
Is there a list of all the connectors in the blog?
There's a list in our documentation. So if you go to the docs page or our product page, you can link to the docs, and there's connectors in there. I'll put the links back up here.
All right. And why are you not letting me look at stuff? Okay. Okay, a lot of other, can it support this? Does it connect to that? And you just put that link up there, so I'm not going to go through those. Does AAS support HTTP connections via IIS to MSMD pump like on-prem SaaS does?
You're talking about they going the other way, so people connecting to AS using MSMD pump. So the pump is kind of not needed here because it's already in the cloud and already accessible, already using HTTP. So putting the pump in front of that would kind of be redundant. It does use HTTP, it is in the cloud, and it's accessible that way.
Okay. And with that, Brett looks like he's answered all the rest of the questions. Yana said that you actually answered her question. So with that, guys, I want to thank you very much. The Azure or the analysis services team said that this is something you guys want to do on a regular basis. So what we'll do is we'll probably come back next month. You look like you wanted to say something.
Good.
Okay.
Same, we definitely do.
We'll get Kai back in next month, and we'll walk through some of his favorite features. And again, the intent is for you guys to use these features as a result. So if Josh is successful, you'll go out and start using analysis services, or at least know how as a result of this webinar.
Yeah, please give it a shot. Tell us what works, what doesn't work, what we'd like to see added. And we're hungry for the feedback.
Okay. And with that, guys, I believe I'm on with Reed Haven from Power Pivot Pro next week on doing what's new and exciting in Power BI. And I've gotten permission to actually talk about what we're going to re-release in the following months. So it's going to be stuff that you've never seen before, like the storytelling stuff. So with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. And thank you very, very much for joining.